Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining. In these series of videos, I will be sharing with you some thoughts from a generalist perspective about our industry, the security industry, which I would love to call asset protection, and its current state, where it's headed, and what challenges we're still experiencing. How do we move forward? Because I'm looking at it from a generalist perspective, I'll be talking about a problem, which is called the man with the hammer issue. And I'll also talk about a few strategies to solve this problem. So, what is the man with the hammer problem? It simply, in my view, refers to the fact that a lot of services and solutions today are very narrow in the way they solve organizations' problems. And that when someone is in the sector within our industry that deals with, let's say, video surveillance, all they can talk about is video surveillance. Very rarely do they bring to the fold very comprehensive integration or looking at solving problems with tools and measures that lie outside of technology, and also trying to understand things like organizational culture, compliance, and things of that nature. In the service sector, we also see a little bit of man with a hammer problems. They arise from things like, for example, executive protection, where there is a collective of very, very talented individuals who are focused on solving problems for organizations only at a senior level, or for those executives who are, let's say, qualified to receive these types of services. That also does not address a larger issue for organizations, unfortunately, and the spectrum of problems that they're dealing with in order to facilitate achievement of business objectives and overall risk management. So this fragmentation of technology and services, unfortunately, is something that our industry is going through as a challenge. And it's not helpful for organizations when they're presented with these solutions and they believe that these solutions really address their needs. For example, placement of security technologies in a facility has to start first and foremost with understanding how capable the organization in actually adopting that technology. Do they even understand why they need it? Who's performed a risk and threat assessment? Whether there are competent people in-house who can manage these technologies going forward. That I see is a significant challenge. I also notice how organizations recently have been beefing up their executive protection and threat intelligence teams. However, they do, as much as they do carry out very useful services for a small subset of decision makers, that doesn't really help with the overall asset protection when you have to look at the variety of assets within an organization. So, for example, for some organizations, the assets could be on the human side, so it could be employees in certain functions. But for some organizations, that's not the only critical asset. Some organizations, for example, in the telecom sector and so on, have software and their relationships with third-party, let's say, cloud providers that also are treated as mission-critical assets. And so if you simply concentrate your efforts on protecting executives, that does not address a wider issue of other assets and how to protect those if they are mission-critical. We also have this issue of preaching to the choir. I hear a lot of opinions being voiced within echo chambers, where one practitioner will say what they believe, and that may be very true. And then a lot of other practitioners pitch in and say yes or no. However, what that does, it simply leaves that message within a group of people who have preconceived notions, who have certain agreeableness, if you will, within that community. And so what I observe is more nodding and less challenges to those who voice those opinions, because there could be different ways in which organizations' problems can be solved, in which risks could be assessed, in which assets could be defined. And unfortunately, when someone says we can concentrate our efforts on building out security operations centers, right? And the community says, yes, that's wonderful, let's build security operations centers. People forget that there is a lot of scientific studies and architectural components and engineering components that go into building out something that can qualify as a security operations center. And so it doesn't help us when we all are discussing issues within our own echo chambers. What I see as a useful exercise is to actually look outside of our discipline, outside of our domain, and go and partner with other professions that are related to helping solve these challenges. Unfortunately, I have to talk about ego. In our profession, egotism, I think, is demonstrated, I would say, in a softer manner. It's not so much that a person themselves has a big ego. Some of us do, unfortunately. But I believe it simply stems from a lot of people having had certain experiences and therefore believing that based on their experiences, there are certain truths. And that also makes them a little bit more focused on looking at every problem with only their lens, with their views, with their experience, without having to take a step back and say, can I be humble? Can I be less overconfident about my ability to create a solution for a problem? And actually looking at the discipline of design thinking and borrowing a lot of principles from that discipline, where you would engage with individuals in other fields of, other disciplines such as architecture, engineering, like I said before, that are more closely related to security, and some disciplines that are not related whatsoever, such as any business administration and so on. There are other ways in which we can solve these problems by simply parking our overconfidence. And I think that that's what I mean for specifically our industry, where it's not an individual ego, it's just this set of experience that you have, and that makes you overconfident about being able to solve a problem without having the ability to look at multiple other disciplines and saying, how can I borrow from them? How can I bring solutions that exist in those disciplines to help my client, my organization? So with our ego, overconfidence, we also see how sometimes our ethics are affected. You don't have to go far to look at how many organizations recently have started selling fever detection equipment, and how many of those have no business selling it. You also see stories like the one with eBay, where people who otherwise would have a standing invitation to any conference and to speak to our community have engaged in criminal activity, or it is alleged that they've engaged in criminal activity, because right now they haven't yet been convicted. However, the fact that they have been apprehended And the stories that have been shown in the news media, unfortunately, paint a fairly unethical picture. So that is in combination where this man with the hammer problem, this fragmentation in our industry, where there's more and more narrow solutions to problems, where we have these, I guess, derivatives of the preaching to the choir, the egotism, and the problem with ethics and overconfidence. Well, how do we get unstuck? A few things that I've borrowed from other fields come to mind. The first one is polymathy. So polymathy is the ability of any human to actually borrow information and study information from a variety of fields. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, for example. He is so far named as the ultimate polymath. Think about things that he had dabbled in. We're talking about engineering, architecture, obviously arts, and so many more other fields of interest. And he looked into medicine, he looked into history. So polymathic mindset helps us maintain a healthy level of humility. Yes, it's good to be confident in about what we do. However, when you're sufficiently humble, it reduces the risk of overconfidence and of solving a problem with only the solution that you're thinking about, rather than looking at a wider spectrum of tools and measures. The next thing that I would like to propose to you to think about is this issue of growth mindset. Carol Dweck developed this concept, and I welcome for you to read up on it or watch her TED Talk. I believe that if every practitioner in our field, instead of saying, well, I've been in executive protection for 20 years, or I've been in technology sales, or let's say video surveillance specifically, or access control specifically for an N number of years, if every practitioner like that simply takes a step back and says, yes, I have been in that field for a number of years, so I know how to specifically solve problems with the narrow set of tools and measures in this particular niche. How about I look outside? How about I go and study something that will continue my building my acumen, continue adding to my learning, to my competence, and by growing my my access to a variety of very useful information. And so I feel like this ability, what I would call growth mindset, I think that would be a very useful thing to keep in the back of your mind and to study up on every couple of months, to allow yourself to look outside of your specific field of expertise and start borrowing from other fields and never stop learning. That, I think, is the key issue of growth mindset. You need to allow yourself to think that you don't know everything, and none of us do. And so where can you learn more? How can you be that continual learner? Last but not least, we have been stuck, it seems to me, with these two camps. One is cybersecurity, and another one is physical security. And unfortunately, as much as we're all saying that we're each of the camps is very diverse relative to backgrounds, it's a yes and a no, I should say, because it might be that, let's say, in physical security, there is diversity of, let's say, ethnic backgrounds and people who have had who have been living and working in different countries. So that is granted. The same could probably apply to the field of cybersecurity. But the issue is that if we look at where most of the talent comes from in terms of either either niche, cyber, or physical, it is overwhelmingly from specific categories. So where do cybersecurity people come from? Primarily. Okay, so you either are looking at the degree in computer science, you're looking at people who have started as ethical hackers or simply hackers at the age of 13, 14 or earlier, and basically self-educated, self-taught. And you're looking at people who have focused on specific sets of knowledge and specific disciplines very early on. On the side of the physical security, we're also seeing that most practitioners, not all, and a lot of people challenge me on this, but not all practitioners. However, most practitioners, primarily in senior roles in our industry, have come from where? Military and law enforcement. So that also creates this man with the hammer issue. I go back to what I said before. It seems to me that if we simply stop thinking in terms of that there is a specific area, niche, background that a person needs to come from in order to fulfill certain aspects of asset protection or security. And if we simply say that anybody's welcome and anyone could actually be capable and become competent at protection of assets, be it cyber or physical, right? I think we'll do our industry a great service, and we will offer opportunity without being biased to a great number of people. And finally, we'll stop lamenting about the fact that we have shortage of skilled people in our industry. So, last thoughts. We talked about the man with the hammer problem. I think you should think about that. And please, by all means, if you feel like you want to ask a question, give me a challenge on that. I'll be happy to engage with you. But there are easy ways of parking your ego. There are easy ways of building your growth mindset, and also looking at talent in a different way, that it can come from anywhere. It doesn't require prior knowledge of anything, and it can be taught everything and anything in our industry about ways of effective asset protection. For now, I leave you with these thoughts. I know that I probably will do a better job based on your feedback. So please share that. If there are certain topics within the themes that I started with that you'd like to discuss, if there are questions, by all means, please share them with me, and I'll be happy to include that in my next video. Until then, I really appreciate you watching. Be safe, and thanks for your attention.